Good morning to everybody. And thank you, Dr. Joshi, for enlightening me. I'm not actually in the palliative care field, but as a neurologist, neurosurgeon, we see a lot of patients who need palliative care, especially after brain tumors and things like that. So thank you. I took a lot of notes about all that you said, and I'm hoping to be able to get involved more with palliative care. So I want to thank, first of all, Republica, who's a long-term friend and who I have had great admiration for her work for many years, and the RMD hospitals, and all the organizing committee, Dr. Gautam, Dr. Emmanuel, for inviting me and making me part of this morning. So I'm going to talk about how we can integrate medicine together with mindfulness and meaning so that end of life is a good death. That was a beautiful terminology you used, and I think I'm going to be telling you. Now we know that the availability and access to end-of-life care, she already pointed out that it's there's a huge gap. And a lot of good work is being done by Kerala in India, and it looks like there are sparse centers in the rest of India. But if you look at the funnel, in India, though our very population is huge, 1.4 billion, 7 to 10 million need palliative care, but only less than 4% engage in services. So there's a critical supply shortage, there's a significant bottleneck, and the engagement and support is for a very minute number of people. And if you take Tamil Nadu, we're not too bad. We're doing pretty good. But Kerala is doing much better, and so are some areas in Maharashtra and in the north. But as you can see, they're mainly urban areas. There is a rural shortfall, as expected. Always in all healthcare services, we find there's a rural shortfall. And if you look at the measured need, 6.2 individuals per 1,000 may need palliative care if you take a national statistic. And you add geriatrics to it, like she said, and you get an older adult burden of 12.2%, which is 1 in 8 people of that age group who require care. But it's good that we are having conferences like this and meeting together and hoping to improve services. So we need to know the difference between hospice care, end-of-life care, and palliative care. And all three of these services, unfortunately, could be much more than it is now. So if you look at palliative care, it is a holistic support which you give right from time of diagnosis. It's about relief of symptoms. It is about relieving stress of a serious illness. And it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. So neurology, nephrology, cardiology, it doesn't matter. And the whole goal here is to improve the quality of life. Now, I'm a great advocate of improving quality of life because, as you know, in neurology, many conditions have disability. And just because you're left with a disability, you can't stop living. You have to keep going. And so I work very hard on maximizing quality of life after they have a disability and they're left with something that is interfered with their whole being. So this can be provided together with curative treatment. It need not be just a separate thing. You can treat patients. You can also have palliative care. Now, end-of-life care is a little different. It's in the final phase of life. You need not necessarily be sick. You may just be old. You may be 90, 100. Like yesterday, somebody sent me somebody who celebrated 101st birthday. And this is the 4th time he is doing this Mangal Sutra tying for his wife. Because 60th birthday, 80th birthday, like that it went on. Anyway, so this is in the final weeks or months when you don't expect recovery and when they just literally fade away. Elderly people who just fade away. Here the focus is comfort and dignity. Like you said, good death. Hospice care, however, is terminal illness. Now we need to have these definitions very clear in our head. And the timeline can be anything from 1 month to 6 to 8 months. Very often, it rarely goes up to 1 year. And this is very, very specific care that you have to give. You have to focus on comfort, quality of life. We are not focusing on any cure. We know that nothing more can be done. We just keep them medically, emotionally, and spiritually comfortable. And if you look at the palliative care scenario again here, I've summarized everything into this slide again. Now, what do you mean when we say care which integrates medicine, mindfulness, and meaning? One is the biomedical system control. Pain relief, medically appropriate treatment, all that. But here again, there's a challenge. Pain relief can be very inconsistent. Availability of pain-giving medicines are scheduled drugs, so their availability may be limited. Access may be poor. Then you got community, home-based, and culturally grounded care, which you can give. Palliative care can be given with kindness, where you support the patient at home, give them dignity, give them continuity. Then, of course, psychosocial and spiritual support. I'm going to talk more on the psychosocial and spiritual support because that is an area which is often forgotten in our anxiety to be so being doctors and actually delivering the medical care. We sometimes bypass that part of it, which is far more crucial sometimes. So what I'm saying is that any caregiver, I'm just going to run through some caregiver attitudes for a peaceful and happy end-of-life care. So one of the things is, sometimes we are so eager or we are so upset as caregivers that this person is going to die, that we focus on their death. Instead, what we suggest is that you focus on the person, focus on being there for them, and focus on the patient's life, his story, his fears, hopes, identity, etc. And if you look at this is a more mindful way of being a caregiver. So instead of sitting there and saying, yeah, I'm unhappy, you're unhappy, we're going to, things are bad, and that person's already frightened to die, instead you just talk about their life and how much they have contributed and lived. So for this you need open communication. You have to be sensitive, you have to be very honest, no glossing over anything. Have a conversation about the prognosis, the goals of your care, and avoid any collusion. And ideal communication, these are the tips. Just listen actively, use very simple language, provide comfort with your words, respect that sometimes they want to be left alone, respect their peace, don't keep on, trying to be there for them. Be present. When you're there, be a good listener, just sit there, be there. Offer your time and your undivided attention. And whatever you do, convey compassion. And from time to time, ask them what is it they want, what is it they like. Ask about their wishes. And constantly reassure them. And the way teams can improve this kind of communication is by having regular team meetings. When you hand over, make sure you hand over all the elements from one nurse to another and doctor to another. Consent for many processes you have to get from the patient. We often get it from the family. You have to make sure you include the patient if they are cognitively okay. Crisis communication and patient education, briefings from time to time. Tell family, tell patients, this is the status, this is what is likely to happen, etc. And have your end-of-life care conversations, like we said. Feedback, patient support. So, what is a person-centered, coordinated care near end of life? So, I can make the last stage of my life as good as possible because everyone works together confidently, honestly, and consistently to help me and the people who are important to me, including my carers. That's how the patient must feel. My goals and quality of life and death, the people who are important to me, responsive, timely support, honest discussion and planning, my physical, emotional, spiritual needs. So when we look at it, The integrated solutions, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on that because there are people here who are better. I'm only going to the last column where caregiver attitudes and communication is some area where we can all definitely improve things. Because caregivers are lost. They don't know what to do. And it's not just what you say, how you listen, how you communicate in a two-way manner, deliver compassion, and foster trust and connection. So, for peaceful and happy end-of-life care, another thing is respect the choices of the individual and give family and community support. And when you're there, be mindfully present. Be there for the person. Don't be scrolling your phone and then sitting and, casually. Unfortunately, today that's how life is. So practice mindful awareness, non-judgmental kindness, undistracted, focused attention, compassionate presence, and convey to the person, you matter because you are you, and you matter to the end of your life. We will do all we can, not only to help you die peacefully, but also to live until you die. This was written by Dame Cicely Saunders, nurse, physician, and writer, founder of the hospice movement, and way back in 1918. Okay, that bell indicates what time. I mean, you ring once or twice or thrice. Okay, I'm within time. Anyway, so we have to have a paradigm shift, viewing palliative care, hospice care as a gift, not looking at it as giving up. Unfortunately, that is the attitude most people have. So if you want to give, we have a program called Aloha, where we run a course like this. So it's a month 1, month 2 weekend course, and the people, target participants are family caregivers, nurses, volunteers, who are hospice staff, etc. And we have been charging for it. We charge 4,000 rupees if it's a separate weekend, but for the 2-month, 4 weekends at a time, it's 12,000 rupees. And in the weekend 1, we teach them the foundations of compassionate end-of-life care. So understand what palliative and end-of-life care is, recognize signs of dying process, learn to manage basic symptoms, and explore the cultural and spiritual dimensions. On week 2, they understand mindfulness as an emotional regulation tool and empathy training. We practice breath awareness, grounding under stress, mindful communication listening, compassion fatigue, self-care needs. We teach the caregiver, you must also take care of yourself. Then building trust with safe space where they can share whatever they want. We facilitate difficult conversations, manage their guilt, conflict, denial, etc., and legacy building. And last week we combine all this and give them a peaceful environment, etc., and create some plans for going ahead. So the program outputs are, you get confident, you get compassionate, you get supported meaning, you have purpose, mindfulness, and you have a template for end-of-life care where you can use it as a gift and a good experience rather than a bad experience. And when there is an author who asked, she worked with thousands of hospice patients, and she asked them what was their regret in life. And these were the top 5 regrets she came up with. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had let myself be happier. So remember, when you do end-of-life care, these regrets will be going around in their head, even in geriatric care. So this is the summary of those 5 regrets. There's a book by it. I just want to play this video, and there's some sound actually, but it's not coming. Never mind. Because in my opinion, this is how all of us should live our lives at the end of life. It's only a minute and a half. So as we grow older, the message here is actually let go of a lot of things and understand that you can be more accommodating. Many elderly people who complain that their children don't take good care of them, etc., etc. I always tell them, first, make sure that you are a person who is part of the family, who is not just, dominating and pressuring, and then they will naturally retaliate. So you too have to be a cooperative elderly person in the home. So we'll skip this in the interest of time. So if we apply these regrets, I have created caregiver applications based on that. So this will just run through this, which I've already shared with you. And I think these are the 5 sacred conversations anybody can have at end of life palliative care, hospice care. The first one is gratitude. Say thank you to that person for all that they have done for you in their life. Life review. Tell me your story. People love to talk about their life and their story. Legacy. Don't worry. Even after you go, what you have done for me, for so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so is going to live on. Their lasting influence. Forgiveness. Many people have guilt. Tell them, listen, it's okay. It's okay. You forgive, I forgive, we'll just chuck the whole thing out. And letting go. It's okay. It's time for you to rest. It's time for you to close the chapter. Encourage them. I think these 5 sacred conversations, in essence, will help someone peacefully die. And this is the role, in my opinion, of caregivers. And we feel that worthiness and boundaries, rest, play, joy, all of this has to be as part of the life of a caregiver. So my program, Aloha. Why do I do all this? My why is being filled with love and being a contributor from overflow. I want a person or place to be better because I pass through or touch their lives. So every day of my life, I go mad. I make a difference. Every day, in every way. So these are the pillars of my programs. Stress fitness, virtues to love, inner wealth surgery. Like a neurosurgeon, we cut out your limiting beliefs. And a thing called Lotus Consciousness, about which I've written a book and I've given it to Republica. So thank you for this fantastic opportunity. And I think end of life should be, like he said, a good death. It should be a happy period, a pleasant period. It's going to happen anyway. And it's going to happen to all of us. So how beautiful we make it is more important than anything else. And incidentally, for those who don't know, I've just recently taken out my living will. So that is another thing which I think in palliative care and hospice care you need to discuss. So thank you for this opportunity and all the best. Sure. It's okay, I can hear you.
So your backdrop of the presentation, the last few were very nice, interesting, because it reminded me of Robert Langdon's Symbol, the book and the movie. It looked very, very similar to that. Thank you for that. And second thing is, in extension to what Dr. Ganpati and your presentation on good death, I guess it's important that we acknowledge death and allow patients to acknowledge death and not brush it under the carpet by saying that, oh, let's not talk about it now. I guess many times acceptance does not come without acknowledging what we are looking at. So that's the most important thing, because all this, what you spoke of, is because people lack acknowledgement, lack acceptance to what they're doing. If the two existed, I guess things would have been better.
See, when we condemn them as end of life or terminal or whatever, we cease to believe that they still exist. That's why you don't acknowledge. You have to, what I'm saying, when I say you, I mean the point you raised. So if you understand that they are still there and have these sacred attitudes, then you'll find that you are able to help them through the last phases.
Thank you.